Welcome to the Timeless Mind,
Yes,
your ultimate source for bite-sized wisdom from the most powerful books ever written.
absolutely.
If you've ever wanted to absorb like life-changing lessons from classic books, but, without spending hours reading, well, this is the place for you.
This is it.
This is Series 1, Episode 13,
Oh, wow.
The Inner Fortress, Meditations of Marcus Aurelius. Let's dive in.
Let's do it.
Today, we are diving deep, deep into Meditations by Marcus Aurelius.
Yeah.
This is like your shortcut to understanding this classic work.
Yeah.
Our sources today are excerpts from an 1887 English translation with notes that really help put things into context for us.
Yeah, they're great notes.
Our mission is to pull out the most powerful ideas from Aurelius's personal thoughts and give you practical wisdom for finding inner peace and strength, even with everything life throws at us today.
Yeah, in the modern world.
We'll be looking at how his philosophy helped him deal with some really tough stuff like wars, plagues, all of it. And we'll be examining the core beliefs of Stoicism that shaped his whole outlook.
I'm excited.
Marcus Aurelius.
Okay. Marcus Aurelius,
Mm-hmm.
Roman emperor,
Roman emperor.
but also a philosopher.
Also a philosopher.
It almost sounds like something made up,
It really does, like a fictional character.
But this was a real person
Yeah.
living a long time ago.
Yeah.
121 to 180 AD.
Wow.
And his life, let me tell you, was not exactly a quiet one. He had to deal with some major wars, a devastating plague.
So his Meditations, was that like a book he wanted to publish?
Well, no, actually.
Mm.
What's really fascinating about Meditations is that it wasn't intended for anyone else to read. It was really just his private reflections.
So like a journal.
Almost like a journal, yeah, his personal notes.
That's interesting.
And the fact that we still have these notes, I mean, some of them even have location details, like this among the Quadi.
The Quadi?
Yeah, a Germanic tribe he was fighting. You really get the sense of him, working through these deep philosophical ideas while also dealing with the very real pressures of being an emperor.
Even on the battlefield.
Even on the battlefield.
That's incredible.
So, it's like we're getting a backstage pass into the mind of someone who held immense power. And yet he seemingly chose like a very simple philosophical life from a very young age. The intro that we read mentions that he adopted a philosopher's way of dressing and living at just 11 years old.
11.
11. Can you imagine?
No, I was playing with like action figures.
And he was drawn to Stoicism,
Oh, okay.
which at the time was known as a very, very strict school of thought,
Okay.
Really focused on virtue and not so much on comfort or pleasure or those kinds of things.
So that's a pretty unusual path for someone who's going to be emperor.
Very unusual.
But it really shows just how central philosophy was to him, right?
Absolutely.
And Stoicism, from what I understand, it really boils down to this idea of virtue. It's about using your reason and maintaining a certain detachment from external events, both good and bad.
That's right. It's about that inner control.
And this must have been crucial,
Yeah.
right?
In
In how he handled all those incredible challenges that he faced as emperor.
it would have been, those challenges were significant.
Yeah, they were huge.
Our source material talks about wars, a terrible plague that even claimed the life of his co-emperor.
Oh, wow.
Famines, which he tried to help alleviate through charity, and even a rebellion led by one of his most trusted generals.
That's unbelievable. That kind of pressure, I can't even imagine.
And what's important to remember is that Aurelius's philosophy wasn't just some abstract idea. It really directly informed how he responded to these crises.
It was real for him.
It was real. And we see this emphasis on forgiveness,
Forgiveness.
trying to act with integrity. The introduction notes that he actually expressed regret at not being able to personally forgive the rebel general Cassius, and that he chose to destroy letters that would have implicated others in the plot.
That's incredible.
It really says a lot about his character, his commitment to those Stoic ideals, even when facing such a deep betrayal.
That's very powerful.
Now, here's a point that might feel a little bit jarring.
Okay.
While his writings really emphasize gentleness and forgiveness, the introduction also mentions that Marcus Aurelius permitted the persecution of Christians.
Oh, wow.
And some pretty serious persecution. We're talking people like Justin Martyr and Polycarp were among the victims.
That's a real contradiction.
It is. It definitely raises some tough questions.
It does.
And our source notes that this persecution is generally seen as more of a political move than a purely religious one. So Aurelius likely didn't have a very deep understanding of what Christians actually believed.
So he probably just wasn't very familiar.
Right. And what was important to the Roman state was the fact that Christians refused to participate in the state religion, which included worshiping the emperors as gods.
Ah, I see.
And this was seen as defiance, almost like a political act of rebellion.
So it was more about maintaining order and loyalty, from their perspective.
Exactly. And, in a society where even new gods could be officially recognized, outward religious practices held a lot of weight, especially as faith in those traditional Roman gods kind of started to decline. So, this close relationship between the state and the official religion meant that refusing to participate in these acts was viewed with a lot of suspicion. And, you add to that all the rumors that were spreading at the time.
Rumors.
Our source mentions accusations of cannibalism and immorality.
Wow.
And you can see how early Christians became targets.
That makes sense.
It's a really stark reminder that even someone considered the quote-unquote noblest of pagan emperors was still operating within the context of his time.
With all its political reality.
Absolutely.
That's something to think about. But despite this, he's still referred to as the quote-unquote noblest of pagan emperors. And it also mentions that even his close friends in Rome sought his final advice before his last military campaigns. That really speaks to the respect and authority that he held.
It does.
Even with this apparent blind spot regarding the Christians.
Yeah, it's a complex picture.
It is. So we talk about Marcus Aurelius, the man, the emperor. Now let's get into the core of Stoicism as it appears in Meditations. Our source material goes into their understanding of the universe. It's like they had a whole cosmology, right?
They did.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting how they pulled ideas from earlier Greek philosophers.
All right.
So, for instance, they took Heraclitus's concept of constant change, the idea that everything is in flux, often symbolized by fire.
Okay, fire. Got it.
And they also incorporated Democritus's atomic theory, though the introduction points out that they were more drawn to this idea of a fundamental, ever-changing, fiery ether as the basis of the universe.
Fiery ether. That sounds pretty out there.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So they believed that this primal fire transformed into the other elements that we know.
Oh, wow.
Vapor, water, earth, air, and even a more destructive kind of fire that was separate from this foundational ether.
That's pretty wild. So were the stars part of this fiery picture too?
They were. The Stoics saw stars as fiery bodies embedded in this ether.
Oh, okay.
They even considered them to be living entities sustained by vapors that were rising from the earth.
Oh, wow.
But, the introduction notes that later Stoics, they shifted their focus away from these specifics of this cosmology and more toward what it meant for us as humans, our connection to something greater, the divine, and to each other.
To each other, okay.
Yeah, which leads us to their understanding of the soul. So material, fiery, a divine spark.
Okay, let's unpack that.
So the Stoics believed that the soul was a physical thing, like a kind of fiery energy that was spread throughout the body.
Okay.
And it acted as the guiding or dominant principle. And this divine spark wasn't just a metaphor.
It was real.
It was real. They saw it as this indestructible piece of universal reason.
Universal reason.
Which they equated with God. So our ability to think, to reason, wasn't just, some biological function for them. It was a direct link to the divine intelligence of the cosmos. Almost like having a built-in connection to the universe's operating system of logic.
I love that. The universe's operating system.
Right.
Okay. So that connection, that shared capacity for reason, that's what formed the basis of human brotherhood for them, more than just, our shared biology.
Exactly. The introduction quotes Aurelius saying, "For we are not just of the same flesh and blood, but our minds are nearly related."
Okay.
So, this kinship of mind and reason, it was a real cornerstone of their ethical beliefs.
So what about the afterlife? Our source mentioned that there were some differing views among the Stoics on that.
Yeah, that's right. So unlike some other schools of thought at the time, the Stoics, they didn't really have this cut and dry dogma about the afterlife. The most common idea was that the individual soul would eventually be reabsorbed back into this universal soul, maybe after some kind of cosmic reset or something like that.
Got it.
But, the specifics of when and how this happened weren't really firmly established. There was debate about it. What remained central was this relationship between our individual reason and the universal reason.
And this relationship to the divine, to this universal reason, that ties directly into Stoic ethics, right?
Absolutely.
So living in accordance with reason is the ultimate good, which for them was the same as virtue. And
Yeah.
happiness isn't about pleasure or success or those external things. It's about living a virtuous life.
That's the key.
That's a pretty powerful concept.
It is.
And it leads to their core argument. Virtue is the only true good.
The only true good.
And, the intro emphasizes how important that was for the Stoics. Virtue is the only thing that's truly admirable and self-sufficient. And those external things, like being sick or facing hardship, they can't really harm a virtuous person.
Right, because true harm can only come to your character.
Right. And they even went so far as to say a virtuous person is like a king or even a god among men
It's true.
in their resilience and their inner strength.
Right, they're unbreakable in a way.
So everything else, wealth, health, reputation, all of that, those are intermediate things. Neither inherently good nor bad, but indifferent.
Yeah.
And our source suggests this idea might have its roots in the philosophy of cynicism.
Yeah, that's a really interesting connection. You think about philosophers like Diogenes,
Diogenes.
who famously rejected all those conventional societal norms and lived like a very simple, almost intentionally provocative life.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
The Stoics saw cynicism as kind of an extreme version of their philosophy, but they adopted, a more practical approach.
Right.
So while they still had this idea of the perfectly wise and virtuous person, they recognized that in the real world, you had all these good men with lofty aims and blameless lives. They were striving for virtue within the complexities of everyday life.
So it made it more adaptable, more accessible.
Exactly. Less of an impossible ideal and more of a practical guide.
That's great. Okay. So we've talked about living virtuously, understanding our place in the universe. Another key tenet is this idea of living in accordance with nature and reason. And Aurelius, he writes about this so much in Meditations.
He does all the time.
Yeah.
He constantly reminds himself, and by extension us, that we need to align our actions and our thoughts with the natural order of the universe, with our own capacity for rational thought.
So it's about accepting the things we can't change.
Yes.
And focusing our energy on how we respond to those events internally.
It's all about cultivating that inner resilience,
Yeah,
inner control, no matter what's going on externally.
I like that.
So treating others with justice, with humanity, with a sense of freedom, and with a kind of genuine seriousness. All of these are key aspects of living in harmony with nature and reason.
And it also mentions this idea of approaching each day as if it were your last.
Oh, yeah.
Like living without impulsiveness, pretense, and self-centeredness as a way to achieve a kind of godlike way of living.
Yeah, that's a powerful way to look at it. And this idea that external events, no matter what they are, shouldn't be able to shake our inner peace.
Inner peace.
We should be cultivating this mind that's calm and in control of its own thoughts. Because true happiness comes from this inner state. It doesn't come from those external circumstances.
Right. So understanding that everything is temporary.
Yes.
Fame, pleasure, even life itself. That's also crucial for maintaining that perspective, right?
It really is.
Death is just a natural part of the cycle.
Part of the cycle, not something to fear.
Right.
And recognizing that fleeting nature of everything helps us to avoid becoming too attached to things we're inevitably going to lose.
Yeah.
The introduction points out how the Stoics understood that all of life unfolds in the present moment.
In the present moment.
And that the total length of our lives is ultimately insignificant because we only ever experience the now.
The now.
And nature operates in these endless cycles.
Yeah.
Showing us the same patterns over and over again. So getting upset about things that happen, it's like this disconnect from that natural order.
I see.
So it really comes down to a shift in perspective. Even things that seem negative or bad can be seen as part of these larger natural processes. And this is where the value of philosophy really shines through.
Yeah, philosophy, as our source says, is what endures.
It endures.
It provides us with the practical wisdom to navigate the world and a framework for deeper contemplation.
So without reason, without good judgment, a person is, in a way, philosophically speaking, already dead.
Wow.
Even the seemingly unpleasant parts of the natural world have a certain harmony to them when you see them as part of nature's overall design.
Okay. The introduction also touches on the importance of our thoughts, our internal dialogue.
Yes.
We should really only be focusing on thoughts that we'd be willing to share.
Yes.
Thoughts that are characterized by sincerity and kindness and a focus on the common good, right?
Absolutely.
And avoiding that negativity. We should be guided by that divinity within our reason
Our inner guide.
in all our actions.
And, our actions should be free from reluctance, from selfishness, from a lack of foresight, and from these over-the-top emotional reactions.
Mm.
We should try to avoid being artificial or getting caught up in unnecessary chatter.
Mm-hmm.
And that inner spark of reason, that connection to the universal intelligence, that should be our guiding light.
Yeah, I like that.
We should try to live in a way that when death comes, we haven't left our true purpose unfulfilled.
Wow.
A true philosopher, the introduction suggests, is neither subservient to others nor detached from the world.
So it's about finding that balance. And it all comes back to managing our judgments, paying attention to what he calls our opinionative faculty to prevent ourselves from forming beliefs that go against the natural order.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to put it, right?
Yeah.
So acting with kindness,
Yeah.
accepting the way things are,
Yeah.
defining things clearly so we understand their true nature
Mm-hmm.
and how temporary they are.
Yeah.
Cultivating a mind that's pure and strong and disciplined, living in accordance with our inner nature,
Yeah.
free from being controlled by these external fears and desires.
Yeah. I like that a lot.
And, the introduction really sums it up beautifully.
Okay.
They talk about developing this intellectual resilience in the midst of this constant flow of sensory experiences.
And they remind us of that stoic understanding of pleasure and pain and how fleeting fame truly is.
Right. They encourage us to find contentment in the present moment, to act justly and for the benefit of the wider community.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And to recognize that our habits and tendencies, they really shape our experiences.
Yeah.
So we should expect certain behaviors from certain kinds of people.
Yeah.
And always remember how temporary we are, how temporary those who, criticize us are.
Wow. That is a lot to take in. It's amazing how relevant all of these thoughts, these ideas are today.
It's incredible, isn't it? It really speaks to the enduring power of these core Stoic principles for navigating the human experience.
They really do.
And, the fact that he was this incredibly powerful figure grappling with these fundamental questions that we all face just makes it so much more relatable,
Absolutely. So as we wrap up our deep dive today into Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, what are some of the key takeaways that really stick with us in the 21st century?
Well, I think the emphasis on focusing our energy on what we can control is just so crucial in our world today.
It is, yeah.
Right? It's so overwhelming, it's unpredictable.
Yeah, it really is.
And these Stoic ideas, accepting what we can't change, understanding that external things are temporary.
Yeah.
And really prioritizing virtue and reason as this foundation for a good life. They offer a really powerful framework for dealing with the challenges that we face and finding that inner stability.
It's about beginning that inner fortress that we mentioned in our series title, right?
Exactly. It's about having something solid and reliable that you can always come back to, no matter what's happening around you.
So for you, the listener, think about one area in your life right now where you could apply a Stoic principle of acceptance. Or focusing on your own virtue. Maybe it could bring you a greater sense of peace or effectiveness.
Absolutely.
How might looking at a challenge through the lens of impermanence, remembering that this too shall pass, or really focusing on what you have the power to change, how might that shift your perspective?
It's a powerful question to ask ourselves.
It really is. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into Marcus Aurelius's Meditations.
Yes, thank you for listening.
And we encourage you to, keep thinking about these ideas.
Absolutely.
And see how incorporating some of this Stoic wisdom might help you cultivate greater resilience and tranquility in your own life.
It's really life-changing stuff.
Until next time.
Bye.